In a distant land where the golden sands of the desert met the lush green valleys nourished by a single winding river, there existed a small village named Nur-i-Dil. It was a place where time seemed to move slowly, where the call to prayer echoed 5 times a day across mud-brick homes and narrow alleyways, and where every soul knew the name and story of their neighbor. The people of Nur-i-Dil were simple folk, farmers, weavers, potters and shepherds, who lived by the sweat of their brows and the mercy of Allah. Among these humble inhabitants lived a young man named Yusuf. He was 25 years of age, with a lean frame hardened by years of labor, eyes that reflected the color of the earth after rain, and a face marked not by bitterness, but by quiet resilience. Yusuf was an orphan. His father had passed away when he was only 7, leaving behind nothing but a small, crumbling house on the outskirts of the village and a legacy of honesty. His mother, a woman of immense patience and piety, had raised him alone, working as a seamstress until her fingers bled and her eyes grew weak. She had taught him one thing above all else. Ya Yusuf, दुनिया तुम्हें कुछ ना दे, लेकिन अल्लाह से कभी शिकवा मत करना. वफादारी और खिदमत से ही तकदीर बदलती है. O Yusuf, even if the world gives you nothing, never complain to Allah. Destiny changes only through loyalty and service. When Yusuf was 18, his mother too departed from this world, leaving him utterly alone. He buried her with his own hands in the village graveyard beside his father and wept until the dawn broke over the distant mountains. From that day forward, Yusuf lived a life of solitude and service. He had no land to farm, no shop to run, no inheritance to fall back upon, but he had his hands, his faith, and his mother's words etched into his heart. Yusuf became a khadim, a servant. He worked for anyone who needed help. He would carry water from the well for the elderly, chop wood for the widows, mend roofs for those who could not afford laborers, and tend to the animals of the sick. He never asked for payment. Instead, he would say, Jo Allah dega wo kafi hai. Whatever Allah gives is enough. The villagers loved him, but they also pitied him. Some would leave a loaf of bread at his doorstep. Others would offer him leftover stew. Yusuf accepted these gifts with gratitude, never with shame, and he would always say a quiet prayer for the giver. His home was a single room with walls that had seen better days. The roof leaked when it rained, and the winter winds crept through the cracks like invisible thieves. Inside, there was a straw mat, a clay pot for water, a small wooden box containing his mother's Quran, and a worn prayer rug that had once belonged to his father. Every night after the Isha prayer, Yusuf would sit on that rug, open that Quran, and recite the verses his mother had taught him. He would weep as he read, not from sorrow, but from a deep, unexplainable connection to the words of Allah. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. So verily, with hardship comes ease. Verily, with hardship comes ease. He would repeat this verse again and again, believing it with every fiber of his being. The village of Nur-i-Dil was ruled, in a manner of speaking, by a wealthy merchant named Haji Farouk. He was not a cruel man, but he was not particularly kind either. He had accumulated his wealth through trade, caravans of silk, spices, and jewelry that traveled from the east to the west and back again. Haji Farouk lived in the largest house in the village, a grand structure with high walls, ornate wooden doors, and a courtyard filled with fruit trees and fountains. He had servants, guards, and scribes. He prayed 5 times a day, gave zakat during Ramadan, and considered himself a pious man. Yet, there was a coldness in his heart, a distance between him and the people he claimed to care for. Yusuf had worked for Haji Farouk on several occasions. He had cleaned the merchant's stables, repaired his courtyard walls, and once spent an entire week helping to unload goods from a caravan that had arrived late in the season. Haji Farouk had paid him fairly, but never generously. He had looked at Yusuf the way one might look at a tool, useful but replaceable, and Yusuf, for his part, had served without complaint with the same dedication he gave to everyone else. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, Yusuf sat outside his home, watching the stars emerge one by one. He had spent the day helping an old woman named Bibi Sakina carry her belongings to her daughter's house in a neighboring village. The journey had been long, the load heavy, and his back ached with a dull, persistent pain. But his heart was light. Bibi Sakina had cried and kissed his forehead before he left, calling him Mera Beta, my son, and that had been payment enough. As he sat there, lost in thought, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. He looked up to see a figure emerging from the shadows. A man, cloaked in a simple grey robe, with a staff in one hand and a small bundle in the other. The man's face was obscured by the hood of his cloak, but his presence carried a strange serenity, as if he moved through the world without disturbing it. "Assalamu alaikum," the stranger said, his voice gentle and low. "Wa alaykumu assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu," Yusuf replied, rising to his feet. "How may I help you, O traveler?" The stranger paused, tilting his head slightly as if studying Yusuf in the dim light. "I seek only a place to rest for the night," he said. "I have traveled far, and the road ahead is long. I saw your home and thought perhaps you might offer me shelter." Yusuf looked back at his crumbling house, at the single room with its leaking roof and cold stone floor. He thought of the fact that he had nothing to offer, no bed, no warm meal, no comfort. And yet, the teachings of his mother echoed in his mind. "Mehman Allah ki nemat hai. Agar tere paas kuch na ho, to bhi usse apni khidmat de." A guest is a blessing from Allah. Even if you have nothing, still offer them your service. "Ya Akhi," Yusuf said warmly, placing his hand over his heart. "My home is humble, and I have little to offer, but what I have is yours. Please, come inside." The stranger nodded, and together they entered the small dwelling. Yusuf offered his own prayer rug for the man to sit on, brought him water from the clay pot, and shared the half loaf of bread he had been saving for the morning. They ate in silence, and when the meal was finished, the stranger looked at Yusuf with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Tell me, young man," the stranger said softly, "why do you live this way? Why do you serve others when you yourself have so little?" Yusuf lowered his gaze, his fingers tracing the worn threads of the prayer rug. "Because," he said slowly, "my mother taught me that Wafadari or Khidmat se hi Taqdeer badalti hai. Loyalty and service, these are the keys that unlock the doors of destiny. I have no wealth, no family, no status, but I have my faith and I have my hands. And as long as I can serve others, I feel that I am fulfilling the purpose Allah has written for me." The stranger smiled, a smile that seemed to illuminate the darkness of the room. "You speak with the tongue of the righteous," he said, "and I have no doubt that Allah sees what you do, even if the world does not." They spoke late into the night about faith, about patience, about the trials of life and the mercy of the Creator. And when the conversation finally ended, the stranger lay down to sleep, and Yusuf sat by the doorway, gazing up at the stars, wondering if his mother was watching him from the heavens above. He did not know then that this encounter, this simple act of hospitality, would be the beginning of a journey that would test his faith, shatter his world, and ultimately reveal the truth his mother had spoken, that destiny indeed changes through loyalty and service. The next morning, Yusuf awoke before the first light of dawn, as was his habit. He performed his ablution with the cold water from the clay pot, shivering slightly as the chill seeped into his bones, and then stood for the Fajr prayer. As he recited the verses, his heart felt unusually heavy, as though a weight had settled upon his chest during the night. He could not explain it, this strange unease that had crept into his soul like fog creeping over the valley. When he finished his prayer, he turned to wake his guest, but the stranger was already gone. The prayer rug where he had slept was neatly folded, and beside it lay a small cloth pouch. Yusuf picked it up, feeling its weight in his palm, and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 silver coins, more money than Yusuf had seen in months. His first instinct was to chase after the stranger, to return the coins, for he had not offered shelter for payment. But when he stepped outside, the traveler was nowhere to be seen. The grey light of early morning revealed only empty pathways and the distant silhouettes of date palms swaying in the breeze. Yusuf stood there for a long moment, the pouch clutched in his hand, his mind swirling with questions. Who was that man? Why did he leave this gift? And why do I feel as though something has changed, though I cannot name what it is? He whispered a prayer of gratitude, Alhamdulillah, and tucked the pouch into the inner pocket of his worn tunic, deciding that he would use the coins only when absolutely necessary, for they felt sacred somehow, as though they carried a purpose beyond mere currency. The days that followed were much like the ones before, filled with labor, service, and simple acts of kindness. Yusuf continued to help the villagers without expectation of reward. He carried sacks of grain for farmer Hamza, whose back had given out after decades of toil. He read Quran to old Jamal, who had lost his sight and missed the comfort of hearing Allah's words. He sang lullabies to the orphaned children who lived in the corner house, children whose eyes reminded him of his own childhood, lonely, uncertain, but clinging to hope. Yet despite all this, the heaviness in Yusuf's heart did not lift. In fact, it seemed to grow with each passing day. He began to notice things he had never noticed before. He saw how the other young men of the village, men his own age, were building lives for themselves. Ahmad had married and now had a son. Bilal had taken over his father's carpentry shop and was earning enough to expand it. Even Salim, who had once been as poor as Yusuf, had found work as a caravan guard and now wore fine leather boots and carried a sword at his side. And then there was Yusuf, still living in a crumbling house, still wearing the same patched tunic, still eating whatever scraps were given to him. He felt, for the first time in many years, the sharp sting of loneliness. Not just the physical loneliness of living alone, but the deeper, more painful loneliness of feeling as though the world was moving forward while he remained frozen in place, unseen and unremembered. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of helping to rebuild a collapsed wall at the village mosque, Yusuf returned home and collapsed onto his prayer rug. His body ached in ways that made him feel older than his years. He sat there in the dim light of a single oil lamp, staring at the cracked walls of his home, and for the first time since his mother's death, he felt the weight of doubt pressing down upon him. "Ya Allah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Have I been foolish? Have I wasted my life in service to others while neglecting myself? I have given and given, and yet I have nothing. I have been loyal, I have been patient, but where is the change my mother spoke of? Where is the shift in my destiny?" He covered his face with his hands, and tears began to fall, hot, bitter tears that he had been holding back for so long. "I do not ask for riches, Ya Rab. I do not ask for a grand house or fine clothes, but I am tired. I am so very tired, and I am afraid that I will die alone, forgotten, with nothing to show for all the years I have spent trying to please you." The words poured out of him like a dam breaking, and once they began, he could not stop them. He wept and prayed and wept, until his throat was raw and his eyes burned. He recited every dua his mother had taught him. He recited Ayat al-Kursi, seeking protection and comfort. He recited Surah Yusuf, the chapter named after the Prophet, whose life had been filled with trials and betrayals, yet who had remained steadfast in faith. As he recited the verse, "Kala innama ashku bathi wa huzni ilallahi," he said, "I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah." Yusuf felt a strange sense of release, as though speaking his pain aloud to Allah had lifted a portion of the burden from his shoulders. He realized then that his mother had never promised him an easy life. She had never said that service and loyalty would bring immediate reward. She had only said that destiny changes through these things, and change, he understood now, often comes slowly, quietly, in ways we cannot predict or control. Yusuf wiped his tears and took a deep breath. "Forgive me, Ya Allah," he said softly. "Forgive my moment of weakness. I do not wish to complain. I only wish to understand. But even if I never understand, even if my life remains as it is until my last breath, I will continue to serve, because you have commanded it, and because my mother believed in it, and because I believe that you see me even when no one else does." That night Yusuf slept more deeply than he had in weeks, and in his dreams he saw his mother. She was standing in a field of white flowers, her face radiant with light, and she was smiling at him. She did not speak, but somehow Yusuf heard her voice in his heart. "Sabr kar mera beta, teri kurbani zayi nahi jayegi." Be patient, my son. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. When he awoke the next morning, the heaviness in his chest had not entirely disappeared, but it had softened. He performed his Fajr prayer with renewed intention, asking Allah not for wealth or ease, but for the strength to continue, for the wisdom to see the blessings hidden within his struggles, and for the grace to remain loyal to the path his mother had taught him. Little did Yusuf know that his prayer had been heard, not just heard, but answered in a way that would soon turn his entire world upside down. For in the grand house on the hill, Haji Farouk was facing a crisis of his own, one that would soon pull Yusuf into a trial far greater than anything he had ever known. And in that trial, the true meaning of Wafadari, loyalty, and Khidmat, service, would be tested in ways that would shake the very foundations of his faith. But for now, Yusuf simply lived day by day, prayer by prayer, act of service by act of service, trusting that Allah's plan was unfolding, even if he could not yet see its shape. 3 days after Yusuf's tearful prayer, an unexpected summons arrived at his door. It came in the form of a young boy, no more than 10 years old, dressed in the fine linen clothing that marked him as a servant from Haji Farouk's household. The boy knocked timidly on Yusuf's door, just as the midday sun reached its zenith, casting short shadows across the dusty pathways of Noor-e-Dil. "Yusuf Bhai," the boy said breathlessly when Yusuf opened the door. "Haji Farouk has sent for you. He requests that you come to his house immediately. He says it is a matter of great urgency." Yusuf's heart skipped a beat. In all the years he had lived in this village, in all the times he had worked for the wealthy merchant, never once had Haji Farouk summoned him with such urgency. He wiped his hands. On his tunic, he had been in the middle of mending a broken wheel for widow Amina, and nodded to the boy. "Tell Haji Farouk I will come at once," Yusuf said. "Let me gather myself, and I will follow you shortly." The boy ran off, and Yusuf quickly performed a fresh ablution, changed into his cleanest tunic, though it was still faded and patched, and whispered a brief prayer. "Bismillah, Ya Allah, whatever awaits me, grant me wisdom and patience." Then he set off toward the grand house on the hill. As he walked through the village, Yusuf noticed people staring at him with curious eyes. Some whispered to one another behind their hands, others simply watched in silence. It was as though the entire village knew something he did not, and the weight of their collective gaze made him feel suddenly vulnerable, exposed. But he kept his head down and his steps steady, reminding himself of his mother's words. "Duniya ki nazar se mat dar, Allah ki nazar se dar." Do not fear the gaze of the world. Fear only the gaze of Allah. When he arrived at Haji Farouk's house, the great wooden doors stood open, and the courtyard beyond was unusually quiet. Normally, this space would be bustling with servants, merchants conducting business, and the sounds of commerce. Coins clinking, voices haggling, animals being led to and from the stables. But today, it was eerily still. Only the gentle splash of the fountain in the center of the courtyard broke the silence. A stern-faced servant met Yusuf at the entrance and gestured for him to follow. They walked through corridors lined with intricate carpets and walls adorned with calligraphy, verses from the Quran written in gold leaf. Yusuf had seen these hallways before, but today they seemed different somehow, as though the very walls were holding their breath. Finally, they reached a large sitting room where Haji Farouk sat on a cushioned divan, his face drawn and pale. The merchant, who was usually the picture of confidence and control, looked as though he had not slept in days. His beard, normally well-groomed, was unkempt. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were clouded with worry. Beside him sat his eldest son, Tariq, a young man of 23 who had inherited his father's business sense, but lacked his discipline. Tariq's face was a mask of barely concealed anxiety. "Assalamu alaikum, Haji Sahib," Yusuf said, placing his right hand over his heart and bowing slightly in respect. "Wa alaikumu assalam," Haji Farooq replied. Though his voice lacked its usual authority, he gestured to a cushion across from him. "Please, Yusuf, sit. I have something of great importance to discuss with you." Yusuf sat, his hands resting on his knees, his heart beating faster now. He waited in silence, as was proper, for the elder to speak first. Haji Farooq closed his eyes for a moment, as though gathering the strength to say what needed to be said. Then he opened them and fixed Yusuf with a penetrating stare. "Yusuf," he began slowly, "I have known you since you were a boy. I watched you grow up under the care of your late mother. May Allah grant her Jannah. I have seen you work in this village with a dedication that is rare. You are honest, you are hard-working, and though you have nothing, you have never once been accused of theft or dishonesty." Yusuf listened, unsure where this was leading, but he simply nodded. "Alhamdulillah, Haji Sahib. My mother taught me that honesty is the foundation of faith." Haji Farooq nodded, slowly. Yes, she did. And it is because of this, because of your reputation, that I am about to place an enormous responsibility upon your shoulders." He paused and then continued, his voice heavy with emotion. 3 days ago, my caravan returned from the eastern cities. It carried goods worth more than 20,000 dinars, silks from Persia, spices from India, jewelry from Damascus. It was the largest and most valuable shipment I have ever brought to this region. Yusuf's eyes widened slightly. 20,000 dinars was an unimaginable sum, more wealth than the entire village of Nur-i-Dil would see in a lifetime. "But," Haji Farooq continued, and his voice cracked slightly, "the caravan was ambushed 2 days' journey from here. Bandits, ruthless men who knew the route, who knew the value of what we carried. They killed 3 of my guards, wounded 5 others, and made off with nearly everything." Tariq, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice bitter. "They took everything, Yusuf, everything. The silks, the spices, the gold. My father is ruined. We are ruined." Haji Farooq raised a hand to silence his son. "Not everything was taken," he said, and now his gaze intensified. "There is one chest, a single chest, that survived. The bandits overlooked it because it was hidden beneath empty sacks in the last wagon. Inside that chest are jewels and gold coins worth approximately 5,000 dinars. It is all I have left. It is the only thing standing between my family and complete financial collapse." Yusuf felt his throat tighten. He could sense what was coming, and the weight of it made him feel as though the air had been sucked from the room. "I need someone I can trust," Haji Farooq said, leaning forward, his eyes boring into Yusuf's. "Someone who will guard this chest with their life. Someone who will not be tempted by its contents. Someone who understands the meaning of Wafadari, loyalty. I need you, Yusuf." The room fell silent. Yusuf could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. What are you asking of me, Haji Sahib?" "I am asking you to take this chest to the city of Al-Kamar," Haji Farooq said. "It is a journey of 7 days on foot. In Al-Kamar, there is a merchant named Haji Mahmud, an old friend of mine. He has agreed to purchase the jewels and provide me with the capital I need to rebuild my business. But I cannot send my own men. Word has spread of the attack, and I do not know who among my servants might have betrayed me to the bandits. I need someone from outside my household. Someone the thieves would not expect, someone who has nothing to gain from betraying me." Yusuf's mind raced. 7 days on foot through dangerous roads, carrying 5,000 dinars worth of treasure. Alone. It was madness. It was suicide. And yet, as he looked into the desperate eyes of Haji Farooq, a man who had always been distant, always been cold, but who was now humbled and broken, Yusuf felt something stir within him. "Why me?" Yusuf asked quietly. There are stronger men, men with weapons, with experience. Because, Haji Farouk said, and for the first time his voice softened, strength and weapons mean nothing without loyalty. And you, Yusuf, have proven your loyalty every single day of your life. You serve without asking for anything in return. You give when you have nothing to give. If there is any man in this village I can trust with my family's survival, it is you. Yusuf sat in silence, his hands trembling slightly. He thought of his mother's words. He thought of the stranger who had stayed in his home. He thought of his prayer 3 nights ago when he had asked Allah for strength and purpose. If I do this, Yusuf said slowly, I do it not for reward, but because you have asked, and because it is my duty to help those in need. But I must ask you one thing, Haji Sahib. Anything, Haji Farouk said. Pray for me, Yusuf said simply. Pray that Allah protects me on this journey, because I'm not strong and I'm not brave, but I will carry your trust as though it were the most sacred thing in the world. Haji Farouk's eyes glistened, and he nodded. I will pray for you every moment until you return. May Allah be with you, Yusuf. And so, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Yusuf left the grand house carrying a wooden chest bound with iron locks, its weight pressing heavily against his back. The villagers watched as he walked through the streets, and though they did not know what he carried, they sensed that something monumental was happening. Some called out blessings, others simply stared. And as Yusuf passed through the village gates and onto the long, dusty road that led toward Al-Kamar, he whispered a prayer that his mother had taught him long ago. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Sufficient for us is Allah, and He is the best disposer of affairs. The journey had begun, and with it, the true test of his loyalty. The first 2 days of the wise journey passed without incident, though they were far from easy. Yusuf walked from dawn until dusk, stopping only for the 5 daily prayers and brief moments of rest beneath whatever shade he could find. A cluster of rocks, a lone acacia tree, the shadow of an ancient stone marker that pointed travelers toward distant cities. The chest on his back grew heavier with each passing hour, its straps digging into his shoulders until they were raw and burning. But Yusuf did not complain. He simply walked 1 foot in front of the other, reciting verses from the Quran to keep his mind focused and his heart steady. The landscape around him shifted gradually. The green valley of Nur-e-Dil gave way to rocky terrain, then to stretches of sandy plains dotted with thorny shrubs. The road itself was little more than a well-worn path, marked by the footprints and wagon tracks of countless travelers who had come before. Occasionally, Yusuf would encounter other wanderers, a shepherd leading his flock, a merchant with a single donkey, a group of pilgrims heading toward a distant shrine. He would greet them with "Assalamu alaikum," exchange a few words about the road ahead, and then continue on his way. He told no one what he carried. He spoke to no one about his mission. On the evening of the 2nd day, as the sun melted into the horizon like molten gold, Yusuf reached a small watering hole surrounded by date palms. It was a known resting place for travelers, and several small camps had already been set up around its perimeter. Fires crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky, and the smell of roasting meat and brewing tea filled the air. Yusuf's stomach growled. He had eaten nothing that day except a handful of dates and some stale bread he had brought from the village. But he had no money to purchase food from the other travelers, and he was too proud to beg. He found a quiet spot beneath a palm tree, away from the main camps, and carefully lowered the chest to the ground. His shoulders screamed in relief. He performed his Maghrib prayer with deep concentration, his forehead pressing into the cool sand, his lips moving silently through the sacred words. When he finished, he sat with his back against the tree trunk, the chest positioned between his legs where he could keep watch over it, and he allowed himself a few sips of water from the leather pouch he carried. As he sat there in the gathering darkness, a figure approached from one of the nearby camps. It was a man, middle-aged, with a round belly and a jovial face. He carried a wooden bowl in his hands, steam rising from its contents. "Assalamu alaikum, akhi," the man said warmly. "I could not help but notice you sitting here alone. It is not good for a traveler to go to sleep hungry. Please, accept this humble offering." The bowl contained a thick stew, lentils, vegetables, and small pieces of lamb. The aroma made Yusuf's mouth water. He hesitated, his pride warring with his hunger. But then, he remembered his mother's teaching, "Rizq ko kabhi mana mat karna, wo Allah ki taraf se hai." Never refuse sustenance, it comes from Allah. "Jazakallahu khairan," Yusuf said gratefully, accepting the bowl. "May Allah reward you for your kindness." The man smiled. "It is nothing, brother. We are all travelers on the same road. Today I give. Tomorrow perhaps I will be the one in need, and someone will give to me. This is the way of things." He lingered for a moment, his eyes drifting to the wooden chest at Yusuf's side. "That is a heavy burden you carry," he observed casually. "What business takes you on this road?" Yusuf's body tensed slightly, though he tried not to show it. "I am delivering something for a merchant," he said vaguely. "It is a matter of trust." The man nodded knowingly. "Ah, yes, trust. A valuable commodity, especially in these times. The roads are dangerous, you know. There have been many attacks in recent weeks. Bandits, thieves, men without conscience who prey on honest travelers." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "You travel alone and unarmed. I hope for your sake that what you carry is not too valuable." Yusuf met the man's gaze steadily. "What I carry belongs to Allah first, and to the one who entrusted it to me second. If harm comes to me, then it is Allah's will, but I will guard it with my life, because that is what Wafadari demands." The man studied him for a long moment, and then his jovial expression returned. "You are either very brave or very foolish, young man. I have not decided which, but I admire your conviction." He gestured toward his camp. "If you wish, you may join us by the fire. There is safety in numbers." Yusuf shook his head politely. "Thank you, but I prefer to keep to myself. I do not wish to be a burden." "As you wish," the man said with a shrug. "But if you change your mind, you are welcome." He walked back toward his fire, and Yusuf watched him go, his instincts telling him to remain alert. There had been something in the man's questions, something too curious, too probing, that made him uneasy. That night, Yusuf did not sleep deeply. He dozed in short intervals, waking frequently to check the chest, to scan the darkness around him, to listen for unfamiliar sounds. The other camps eventually grew quiet as their fires died down, and the only sounds were the rustling of palm fronds in the night breeze and the distant howl of a desert fox. It was during the darkest hour before dawn, the time when the soul is heaviest and the world seems most fragile, that Yusuf heard it, the soft crunch of footsteps on sand. His eyes snapped open. He did not move, did not betray that he was awake. Through half-closed lids, he saw shapes moving in the darkness. 3 of them, approaching slowly, deliberately. One of them was the man who had given him the stew. Yusuf's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He whispered under his breath, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah." There is no power nor strength except through Allah. His hand moved slowly, carefully, to grip a large stone that lay beside him, the only weapon he had. The figures drew closer, 20 paces, 15, 10, and then, just as they were about to reach him, Yusuf sprang to his feet with a shout, "Allahu Akbar!" The sudden movement and the force of his voice startled the would-be thieves. They stumbled backward, and in that moment of confusion, Yusuf grabbed the chest and ran. He ran with every ounce of strength he possessed, his legs pumping, his lungs burning, the heavy chest bouncing painfully against his back. Behind him, he heard shouts, curses, the sound of pursuit. "Stop, you fool! Give us the chest and we will let you live." But Yusuf did not stop. He ran into the darkness, away from the watering hole, away from the path, into the open desert where the sand was loose and treacherous. He ran until his legs felt like they would give out, until his vision blurred with exhaustion. until he could no longer hear the voices of his pursuers. Only then did he allow himself to collapse behind a large boulder, gasping for air, his entire body trembling. He sat there in the darkness, clutching the chest to his chest as though it were his own child, and he wept, not from fear but from the overwhelming weight of what he had taken upon himself. "Ya Allah," he whispered through his tears, "I am not strong enough for this. I am not brave enough, but I made a promise. I gave my word, and I will not break it, even if it costs me my life." As he sat there, broken and exhausted, the first light of dawn began to creep over the eastern horizon, and with it came a strange sense of peace, a realization that he was not alone. Allah was with him. His mother's prayers were with him, and the path ahead, no matter how dark, was one he had chosen out of loyalty and service. He performed his Fajr prayer on the sand behind that boulder, his face turned toward Mecca, his heart turned toward heaven. And when he finished, he stood, lifted the chest once more onto his shoulders, and began walking toward Al-Qamar. The trial had begun in earnest, but Yusuf's resolve had not wavered, not yet. By the fourth day of his journey, Yusuf had lost his way. After fleeing from the thieves at the watering hole, he had abandoned the main road, choosing instead to navigate through the wilderness in the hope of avoiding further danger. But the desert was an unforgiving teacher, and Yusuf was no desert traveler. The landmarks he had been told to follow, a certain hill, a distinctive rock formation, a dried riverbed, were nowhere to be found. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and at night the cold seeped into his bones with such ferocity that his teeth chattered until dawn. His water supply had dwindled to almost nothing. The leather pouch that had once been full now held barely enough for a single day. His food was gone. The last of his bread had been eaten 2 days prior, and the dates had run out the night before. Hunger gnawed at his stomach like a living thing, and thirst cracked his lips until they bled. The chest on his back, which had felt heavy on the first day, now felt impossibly burdensome, as though it contained not jewels and gold, but the weight of the entire earth. Yet still, Yusuf walked. He walked because he did not know what else to do. He walked because to stop meant to give up, and to give up meant to betray the trust that Haji Farouk had placed in him. His legs moved mechanically, one foot dragging after the other, leaving a trail of uneven footprints in the sand. His vision swam with exhaustion. Several times he stumbled and fell to his knees, the chest crashing down beside him, and each time it took longer to summon the strength to rise again. On the afternoon of the 5th day, Yusuf reached what he thought might be his breaking point. The sun was at its zenith, a merciless white disk that seemed to drain all color from the world. The sand beneath his feet shimmered with heat, creating mirages of water and green oases that disappeared the moment he approached them. His tongue felt swollen in his mouth, and his throat was so dry that he could barely swallow. He had not urinated in more than a day, a sign that his body was beginning to shut down from dehydration. He collapsed beneath the sparse shade of a dead tree, its branches twisted and blackened, reaching toward the sky like the skeletal fingers of some ancient giant. He lay there on his side, the chest beside him, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. For the first time since leaving Nur Idil, Yusuf allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might die out here, that his bones might be buried beneath these shifting sands, never to be found, that Haji Farouk's treasure would be lost, and with it, the merchant's last hope of survival. "Forgive me," Yusuf whispered, his voice barely audible. "Forgive me, Haji Sahib. Forgive me, Ami. I tried. I swear by Allah, I tried." And then, as he lay there teetering on the edge of consciousness, a darker thought crept into his mind, a thought that horrified him even as it formed. What if I opened the chest? What if I took just one coin, one small jewel, enough to buy water and food from the next traveler I meet? Would that be such a terrible sin? Would Allah truly condemn me for trying to survive? The thought grew louder, more insistent, feeding on his desperation. He sat up slowly, his hands trembling, and looked at the iron lock that secured the chest. It would be so easy. He could break it open. Just one coin. Just one. No one would ever know. His hand reached out toward the lock, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. And in that moment, he heard his mother's voice, not as a memory, but as clearly as if she was sitting beside him. Yusuf, Amanat ko khianat se mat badal. Amanat Allah ki nishani hai. Yusuf, do not betray trust. Trust is a sign from Allah. Yusuf's hand froze. Tears streamed down his dust-covered face, cutting clean lines through the grime. But I am dying, Ami, he said aloud, his voice breaking. I am dying, and no one will know, no one will remember. And then, as if in answer to his despair, he heard another voice, not his mother's this time, but the voice of the stranger who had stayed in his home, the man in the grey cloak. Allah sees what you do, even if the world does not. Yusuf pulled his hand back as though the chest had burned him. He covered his face with his hands and wept, not quietly, but with great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He wept for his weakness, for his doubt, for the temptation that had nearly broken him. And then he wept in gratitude, for the memories that had saved him from himself. Astaghfirullah, he said over and over. Astaghfirullah, forgive me, Ya Rab, forgive my weakness. I will not betray this trust. Even if I die here, I will not betray it. He forced himself to his feet, though his legs shook violently. He lifted the chest onto his back once more, though the pain in his shoulders was excruciating. And he began to walk again, though every step felt like it might be his last. He recited the only verse he had the strength to remember, Inna ma'al usri yusra. Verily with hardship comes ease. He said it with each step. Inna ma'al usri yusra. With hardship comes ease. Inna ma'al usri yusra. With hardship comes ease. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold, Yusuf saw something in the distance. At first, he thought it was another mirage, his mind playing cruel tricks on him. But as he drew closer, he realized it was real. A cluster of tents arranged in a circle with smoke rising from cooking fires. A Bedouin camp. He stumbled toward it, his vision narrowing to a tunnel, his hearing muffled as though he were underwater. He could see figures moving near the tents, but they seemed impossibly far away. He tried to call out, but his voice came out as barely a croak. His legs gave out, and he fell forward onto the sand, the chest landing beside him with a heavy thud. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a figure running toward him. A tall man in traditional Bedouin robes, his face obscured by a headscarf. And the last thing he heard was a voice shouting, "There is a man here! Quickly, bring water! He is half dead!" And then there was nothing but blackness. When Yusuf awoke, he did not know how much time had passed. Minutes, hours, days. He found himself lying on a woven mat inside a large tent, its fabric walls filtering the harsh sunlight into a soft, golden glow. A damp cloth had been placed on his forehead, and someone had removed his dusty tunic, replacing it with a clean robe. His lips, which had been cracked and bleeding, had been treated with some kind of healing salve, and beside him, in a clay cup, was water, clear, cool water. He reached for it with trembling hands and drank deeply, the liquid feeling like life itself flowing back into his body. As his senses slowly returned, he became aware of voices outside the tent. Low, serious voices speaking in Arabic, but with the distinct accent and dialect of the desert tribes. Carrying a locked chest. Foolish to travel alone through these lands. We should see what is inside. Perhaps it is valuable, but if it belongs to another, it would be haram to take it. Yusuf's eyes shot open fully, and his heart began to race. The chest. Where was the chest? He sat up too quickly, and the world spun around him, but he forced himself to focus. He looked around the tent frantically and saw it. The chest, sitting in the corner, still locked, still intact. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that he nearly wept again. The tent flap opened and an elderly man entered. He was thin and weathered, with a long white beard and eyes that held the wisdom of someone who had seen many seasons come and go. He wore the traditional robes of a Bedouin elder, and he carried himself with quiet dignity. "Alhamdulillah," the old man said softly, a gentle smile on his face. "You have returned to us. We feared you might not wake." Yusuf tried to speak, but his voice was still weak. "The chest," he managed to croak. "Please, do not open it. It is not mine." The elder raised a hand to calm him. "Peace, young one. We have not touched your chest. Among my people, the property of a guest is sacred. You are safe. Here." Yusuf's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Jazakallahu khairan," he whispered. "May Allah reward you infinitely." The elder sat down beside him. "Tell me, what drives a young man to travel alone through the desert, half dead from thirst, carrying a burden that nearly cost him his life? What treasure could be worth such sacrifice?" And so, in a voice that grew stronger with each word, Yusuf told his story. He told of Haji Farouk's trust, of his promise, of the thieves at the watering hole, of his days wandering lost in the desert, and of the moment when he had nearly betrayed that trust out of desperation. When he finished, the elder sat in silence for a long moment, his wise eyes studying Yusuf's face. Finally, he spoke. "You have been tested, young man, and you have not broken. That is rare, very rare. Allah tests those He loves, to purify them, to strengthen them, to prepare them for something greater." "I do not feel strong," Yusuf admitted. "I feel broken." "Strength is not the absence of breaking," the elder said gently. "It is the choice to continue after you have been broken. That is true strength. That is true Wafadari." The elder stood and placed a weathered hand on Yusuf's shoulder. "Rest now. In 2 days, we travel toward Al-Kamar. You will journey with us, and we will see that you reach your destination safely. This, I promise you." Yusuf closed his eyes, and for the first time in days, he felt peace. The depth of his despair had been fathomless, but he had not drowned in it. He had survived, and with Allah's mercy, he would complete his mission. Yusuf spent 2 days in the Bedouin camp, recovering his strength under the watchful care of the tribe. They fed him warm broths made from goat's milk and herbs, flatbread baked fresh on hot stones, and dates so sweet they seemed to melt on his tongue. The elder, whose name was Sheikh Hamdan, treated him not as a stranger, but as an honored guest. The tribe members, men, women, and children, showed him kindness without question, offering him clean clothes, a place to sleep, and most importantly, their protection. During those 2 days, Yusuf learned much about the ways of the desert people. He learned that they measured wealth not in gold or possessions, but in honor, hospitality, and the strength of one's word. He learned that they could read the desert the way scholars read books, understanding the language of the winds, the position of the stars, the subtle signs in the sand that told stories of who had passed and where they had gone. And he learned that despite their harsh environment, they were people of deep faith, praying 5 times a day with a devotion that humbled him. On the morning of the 3rd day, as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, the tribe began to prepare for their journey. The camp was dismantled with practiced efficiency, tents folded, belongings loaded onto camels, children gathered and accounted for. Sheikh Hamdan approached Yusuf, who was carefully securing the chest with fresh rope that one of the tribesmen had given him. "We are ready," the sheikh said. "Al-Kamar is 3 days' journey from here. With our camels and our knowledge of the safe routes, we will arrive before the week's end, insha'Allah." Yusuf bowed deeply. "I have no words to express my gratitude, Sheikh Hamdan. You have saved my life. How can I ever repay you?" The old man smiled, his weathered face creasing with warmth. "Repayment is not necessary, my son. We help because it is our duty as Muslims, as human beings. But if you wish to honor us, then honor the trust you carry. Complete your mission with the same loyalty you have shown thus far. That will be payment enough." They set out as the sun climbed higher in the sky, a caravan of 15 camels carrying families, supplies, and hope. Yusuf was given a place on one of the camels beside a young man named Rashid, who was Sheikh Hamdan's grandson. Rashid was perhaps 20 years old, with bright, curious eyes and an easy smile. He spoke to Yusuf as they traveled, asking about his village, his life, and his journey. "You must love this merchant very much," Rashid observed at one point, "to risk your life for his wealth." Yusuf shook his head. "It is not love for the merchant exactly. It is about Wafadari, loyalty. My mother taught me that when someone places their trust in you, that trust becomes sacred. It is a covenant between you and Allah, not just between you and the person. To break that trust would be to break something within myself." Rashid nodded thoughtfully. "My grandfather says the same thing. He says that in the desert, a man's word is worth more than all the gold in the world because gold can be stolen or lost, but a man's honor, once broken, can never be fully restored." They traveled through terrain that shifted constantly, from hard-packed earth to rolling dunes, from rocky outcroppings to vast, flat expanses that seemed to stretch into eternity. Sheikh Hamdan led them with confidence, following paths that were invisible to Yusuf's untrained eyes. They stopped 5 times a day for prayer, the entire caravan dismounting, performing ablution with sand when water was scarce, and standing together in rows facing Mecca. There was something profoundly moving about praying in the middle of the desert, surrounded by nothing but sand and sky, with the wind carrying their voices toward heaven. On the second evening of travel with the Bedouins, as they made camp in a protected valley between 2 large dunes, something extraordinary happened. After the Maghrib prayer, as the tribe gathered around the fire for their evening meal, a commotion arose from the edge of the camp. 2 of the younger men who had been scouting ahead returned, supporting between them a third figure, a man, bloodied and barely conscious, his clothes torn and dusty. "We found him half a mile from here," one of the scouts said breathlessly. "He has been attacked, robbed. By the look of it." The tribe immediately sprang into action. The women brought water and cloth for bandaging. Sheikh Hamdan himself examined the man's wounds, a deep gash across his forehead, bruises covering his arms and torso, and what appeared to be a broken rib. As they cleaned the blood from his face, Yusuf's heart nearly stopped. It was the jovial man from the watering hole, the one who had given him stew, the one who had led the thieves to attack him. Yusuf felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger, vindication, a dark satisfaction at seeing his enemy brought low. But as he watched the man groan in pain, as he saw the genuine suffering in his face, those feelings gave way to something more complex. This was a human being, a sinner, yes, a thief and a would-be murderer, certainly, but also a creation of Allah, deserving of mercy in his moment of need. Sheikh Hamdan looked up from his examination and called out, "Yusuf, come here." Yusuf approached slowly, and when the injured man's eyes focused on him, recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by fear. "You," the man croaked, "you are the one with the chest." Sheikh Hamdan looked between them. "You know this man?" Yusuf nodded slowly. "Yes, Sheikh. He is one of the men who tried to rob me at the watering hole." A murmur went through the gathered tribe members. Some of the younger men reached for their daggers, their faces hardening with anger. But Sheikh Hamdan raised his hand, and silence fell. "What would you have us do?" the Sheikh asked Yusuf quietly. "He wronged you. By our law, you have the right to demand justice. We could leave him here, or worse." Yusuf looked down at the injured man who was now trembling. Whether from pain, fear, or cold, it was impossible to say. And in that moment, Yusuf remembered a verse his mother had made him memorize as a child. وَلَا يَحْتِمَلْ شَيْءٌ مِّنَ الْخَيْرِ. And let not those among you who are blessed with graces withhold their help from those in need. He took a deep breath. "Sheikh Hamdan," he said quietly, "this man wronged me. This is true, but he is also injured and in need. If we leave him here, he will die. And I cannot have that on my conscience. Please treat his wounds, give him food and water, and when he is well enough, let him go on his way." The injured man's eyes widened in disbelief. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you show me mercy? I tried to kill you." Yusuf knelt beside him, his voice gentle but firm. "Because mercy is what Allah has shown me my entire life. When I had nothing, people gave to me. When I was lost, I was found. When I was dying of thirst, I was saved. How can I receive mercy and not give it in return?" Tears began to stream down the injured man's face, not tears of pain, but tears of shame and remorse. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "Wallahi, I am sorry. I was desperate. My family, they are starving. I thought if I could just get that chest." "Hush," Yusuf said, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "What is done is done. Focus now on healing, and when you are well, return to your family and live an honest life. That is how you can repay this mercy." Sheikh Hamdan watched this exchange in silence, and when it was finished, he placed his hand on Yusuf's head in a gesture of blessing. "You are young," the Sheikh said softly, "but your soul is old. You understand things that men twice your age have not learned. Allah has great plans for you, my son. I am certain of it." That night, as Yusuf lay on his mat beneath the stars, with the chest secured safely beside him and the sounds of the camp settling into sleep around him, he felt something shift within himself. The journey had been brutal. It had tested him in ways he had never imagined. But it had also revealed something important, that loyalty and service were not just about protecting wealth or keeping promises. They were about maintaining one's humanity in the face of hardship. They were about choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. They were about trusting that Allah's plan was unfolding, even when the path was dark and unclear. The turning point had come, not in a dramatic miracle or a sudden rescue, but in a quiet moment of choice. A choice to extend mercy, to remain true to the values his mother had instilled in him, and to trust that the destination would be reached, not through his own strength, but through Allah's grace. Tomorrow, they would arrive in Al-Gamar. Tomorrow, his mission would be complete. But tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, Yusuf simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah." The city of Al-Qamar rose from the desert like a mirage made real. Its white stone walls gleamed in the afternoon sun, and its minarets reached toward the heavens like fingers pointing to paradise. As the Bedouin caravan approached the great gates, Yusuf felt his heart swell with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and profound gratitude. 7 days had passed since he left Nur Idil, 7 days that felt like 7 lifetimes, but he had arrived. Against all odds, he had arrived. Sheikh Hamdan led the caravan to a caravanserai just inside the city gates, a large courtyard surrounded by rooms where travelers could rest, tend to their animals, and conduct business. The place buzzed with activity, merchants haggling over prices, camels being unloaded, children running between the pillars, and the constant murmur of a dozen different languages blending together. As the tribe began to settle in, Sheikh Hamdan turned to Yusuf. "This is where our paths diverge, my son," he said, his aged eyes warm with affection. "You have your mission to complete, and we have our own journey to continue. But before you go, I want you to have this." He reached into his robe and pulled out a small leather pouch. When Yusuf opened it, he found 10 silver dirhams inside, more money than he had seen in months. "Sheikh, I cannot accept this," Yusuf protested, trying to return the pouch. "You have already given me so much." "Listen to me," Sheikh Hamdan interrupted gently, closing Yusuf's fingers around the pouch. "You have walked barefoot through the desert. Your sandals fell apart 2 days ago. You have no proper clothes, no provisions for your return journey. Take this money not as charity, but as a gift between brothers. Use it to buy what you need, and use what remains to help others as you have been helped. This is the way of the faithful." Yusuf's eyes filled with tears. He embraced the old sheikh, holding him tightly. "I will never forget you," he whispered. "Never. You saved my life." "No," Sheikh Hamdan said, pulling back and looking Yusuf in the eyes. "Allah saved your life. We were simply his instruments. Now go, complete your mission. And remember, Wafadari और खिदमत से ही तकदीर बदलती है." Yusuf's heart skipped a beat. Those were his mother's exact words, words he had never spoken, aloud to anyone except the mysterious stranger in the grey cloak. How did you know those words?" Sheikh Hamdan smiled enigmatically. The desert has many secrets, my son, and Allah works in ways we cannot always understand. Now go." Following the directions he had been given back in Nur-e-Dil, Yusuf made his way through the winding streets of Al-Qamar toward the merchant quarter. The city was alive with commerce, silk merchants displaying their wares, spice vendors filling the air with exotic aromas, jewelers calling out the quality of their precious stones. Despite his exhaustion, Yusuf marveled at the beauty and bustle of it all. He had never been to a city this large, and everything seemed both overwhelming and wondrous. Finally, after asking for directions several times, he found himself standing before a large shop with a sign above the door that read, "Haji Mahmud, dealer in fine jewels and precious metals." The building was impressive, 3 stories tall, with intricately carved wooden balconies and windows covered in decorative iron latticework. Yusuf took a deep breath, adjusted the chest on his shoulder one final time, and entered. The interior was dimly lit, but richly appointed. Display cases lined the walls, filled with glittering jewels, ornate daggers with jeweled handles, and various precious objects. Behind a large wooden counter sat an elderly man with a magnificent white beard that reached his chest. He wore fine robes of deep blue silk and a white turban adorned with a golden pin. This was clearly Haji Mahmud. The merchant looked up as Yusuf entered, and his expression shifted from polite curiosity to concern as he took in Yusuf's appearance, his dusty, tattered clothes, his sunburned face, his bare, bleeding feet. "Assalamu alaikum, young man," Haji Mahmud said, rising from his seat. "You look as though you have traveled through Jahannam itself. Please, sit. Let me bring you water." "Wa alaykumu assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu," Yusuf replied, his voice hoarse. "I have come from Nur-e-Dil. I carry something for you from Haji Farouk." At the mention of that name, Haji Mahmud's eyes widened. "Farouk? But I received word that his caravan was attacked, that everything was lost. I thought..." His voice trailed off as his gaze fell upon the wooden chest that Yusuf was carefully lowering to the floor. "This is all that remains," Yusuf said quietly. "He entrusted it to me. I have guarded it with my life, as I promised I would." Haji Mahmud stared at the chest, then at Yusuf, then back at the chest. Slowly, almost reverently, he came around the counter and knelt beside it. "The lock is still intact," he murmured in amazement. You truly brought it across the desert? Alone?" "Not alone," Yusuf corrected gently. "Allah was with me, and I was helped by kind souls along the way." Haji Mahmud produced a key. Haji Farouk had sent it ahead weeks earlier by messenger bird and opened the lock. When he lifted the lid, the interior of the shop seemed to fill with light. Inside lay exactly what Haji Farouk had described. Jewels of every color, gold coins stacked in neat rows, precious stones wrapped in silk cloth, 5,000 dinars worth of treasure, untouched and complete. Tears began to roll down Haji Mahmud's weathered cheeks. "Subhanallah," he whispered. "Subhanallah. When I heard about the attack, I made peace with the fact that Farouk was ruined, that I would never see this merchandise. But you, a young man who looks as though he doesn't have 2 coins to his name, you protected this with your life." "It was not mine to lose," Yusuf said simply. "It was a trust, and betraying trust is betraying Allah." Haji Mahmud stood and embraced Yusuf with the warmth of a father embracing a son. "You are extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Truly extraordinary. Tell me, what did Farouk promise you for this service? What is your payment?" Yusuf hesitated. He promised me nothing. I did not ask for payment. This was a matter of khidmat, of service." Haji Mahmud pulled back, studying Yusuf's face as though seeing him for the first time. "Nothing? You risked your life, suffered beyond measure, and asked for nothing?" "My mother taught me that the greatest rewards come not from men, but from Allah," Yusuf explained. "If I had asked for payment, then I would have been working for Haji Farouk. But I did not ask, so I was working for Allah, and Allah's payment is always greater." For a long moment, Haji Mahmud simply stood there, shaking his head in wonder. Then he turned and walked to a large wooden desk in the corner of the shop. He opened a drawer, pulled out a leather pouch much larger than the one Sheikh Hamdan had given him, and returned to Yusuf. "Whether you asked or not," Haji Mahmud said firmly, "you will be compensated. This pouch contains 200 dinars. It is yours." Yusuf's eyes widened in shock. 200 dinars was more money than most people in Nur-e-Dil would see in 5 years. "Haji Mahmud, I cannot. This is too much." "It is not nearly enough," the merchant insisted, pressing the pouch into Yusuf's hands. "You saved my friend's life, his family's future, and restored my faith in the goodness of humanity. Take it, use it wisely, build a life for yourself, and when you see Farouk again, tell him that Mahmud has purchased the entire contents of the chest and that the funds will be transferred to him within the week." Yusuf stood there, trembling, the weight of the pouch in his hands, feeling both impossibly heavy and impossibly light. I do not know what to say." "Say nothing," Haji Mahmud replied with a gentle smile. "Simply accept that this is Allah's reward for your faithfulness. Your mother was right, young man. Wafadari aur khidmat se hi taqdeer badalti hai. Your destiny has changed today. I can see it. Can you?" Yusuf looked down at the pouch, and then up at the merchant, and slowly a smile spread across his face, a smile of pure, unfiltered joy. "Yes," he whispered, "yes, I can see it." That evening, as the sun set over Al-Qamar, painting the white walls in shades of pink and gold, Yusuf sat in a small room at the caravanserai that Haji Mahmud had paid for. He had bathed for the first time in days, washing away the dust and grime of the desert. He had eaten a full meal, roasted lamb, fresh bread, dates, and sweet tea. He had purchased new clothes, sturdy sandals, and supplies for his return journey. And for the first time in his adult life, he had money, real wealth that could change everything. But more than the money, more than the comfort, more than the physical relief, what filled Yusuf's heart was something deeper, a profound sense of peace. He had been tested, he had suffered, he had doubted, but he had not broken. He had remained faithful to his promise, loyal to his values, and true to the teachings of his beloved mother. As he performed his Isha prayer that night, prostrating on a clean prayer rug in a safe room, Yusuf wept, not from pain or sorrow, but from overwhelming gratitude. "Ya Allah," he prayed, "you have tested me and found me worthy. You have broken me and made me whole again. You have shown me that every step of suffering had purpose, every moment of doubt had meaning. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah." The redemption was complete, the trial had ended, and the humble servant from Nur-e-Dil was ready to return home, transformed, purified, and blessed beyond measure. The journey back to Nur-e-Dil took 9 days, 2 days longer than the journey to Al-Qamar, but this time Yusuf traveled in comfort. He had purchased a sturdy donkey to carry his belongings, proper provisions that would last the entire journey, and even a small tent for shelter. But more than the physical comfort, what made this return journey different was the lightness in his heart. The chest was gone, the burden lifted, and in its place was a sense of purpose and clarity that he had never known before. As he traveled, Yusuf thought deeply about everything that had happened. He thought about the mysterious stranger in the grey cloak who had appeared at his door that fateful night, the man whose words had echoed through the darkest moments of his journey. He thought about the thieves at the watering hole and the injured man he had chosen to forgive. He thought about Sheikh Hamdan and the Bedouin tribe whose mercy had saved his life, and he thought about Haji Mahmud, whose generosity had transformed his circumstances forever. But most of all, he thought about his mother. He could see her face so clearly now, her gentle smile, her work-worn hands, her eyes that always held both sadness and hope. "Wafadari aur khidmat se hi taqdeer badalti hai," she had told him countless times. And now, finally, he understood the full depth of those words. Destiny does not change through luck or through shortcuts or through taking what does not belong to you. It changes through loyalty, loyalty to your values, to your word, to the trust placed in you. And it changes through service, service that expects nothing in return, service that flows from a heart aligned with Allah's will. On the 8th day of his return journey, as Yusuf crested a familiar hill and saw the green valley of Nur-e-Dil spreading out below him, his eyes filled with tears. Home. After everything he had endured, after all the miles he had traveled, after facing death and doubt and desperation, he was finally home. As he descended into the valley, word of his return spread quickly. By the time he reached the village gates, a crowd had gathered. Old women wept with joy. Children ran alongside his donkey, shouting his name. Men who had known him all his life clasped his hands and embraced him. And through the crowd, pushing his way forward with tears streaming down his face, came Haji Farouk. The wealthy merchant looked like a different man than the one Yusuf had left behind. His face was thinner, his eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, his entire bearing marked by worry and fear. But when he saw Yusuf, alive, safe, returned, he let out a cry that was part sob, part prayer. Ya Allah! Ya Allah! Haji Farouk shouted, rushing forward and throwing his arms around Yusuf. You are alive! You are alive! I thought, when weeks passed and you did not return, I thought I had sent you to your death. Forgive me, Yusuf. Forgive me. Yusuf embraced the merchant, feeling the man's body shake with emotion. There is nothing to forgive, Haji Sahib, he said gently. The mission is complete. Haji Mahmud has purchased the entire contents of the chest. He told me to tell you that the funds will be transferred within the week. You are saved. Your family is saved. Haji Farouk pulled back, staring at Yusuf in disbelief. You succeeded? After everything? You succeeded? Not I, Yusuf corrected with a humble smile. Allah succeeded. I was simply the vessel he chose to use. The crowd erupted in cheers and prayers of thanksgiving. People began to gather around, demanding to hear the story of his journey. And so, right there in the village square, as the afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, Yusuf told his tale. He spoke of the theft attempt at the watering hole, of wandering lost in the desert, of the moment of temptation when he nearly opened the chest, of the Bedouin tribe who saved his life, and of the injured thief whom he chose to forgive. As the villagers listened, many wept, some because the story moved them, others because they recognized their own struggles in Yusuf's journey, their own moments of doubt, their own battles between faith and despair. And when he finished speaking, a profound silence fell over the crowd, broken only by the distant call of birds and the rustle of date palm leaves in the breeze. It was old Jamal, the blind elder whom Yusuf had read Quran to for years, who finally spoke. His voice was thin but clear. This young man has shown us the meaning of true faith, not faith that exists only in words or prayers, but faith that is tested in fire and emerges as gold. He has reminded us that in this world of greed and shortcuts, there is still value in loyalty, in service, in keeping one's word even when no one is watching. Yusuf, you have honored not only yourself and your late mother, but our entire village. Haji Farouk, who had been standing silently throughout the telling, now stepped forward again. His expression had changed. There was a softness there that Yusuf had never seen before, a humility that transformed his entire bearing. Yusuf, the merchant said, his voice thick with emotion, you asked for nothing, but I must give you something. Not just money, though Allah knows you have earned far more than I could ever pay, but something greater. I offer you a place in my business, not as a servant, but as a partner. I want to teach you everything I know about trade, about commerce, about building wealth. And when I am old and my time comes to leave this world, I want you to inherit my business, to carry it forward with the same integrity and faith that you showed on this journey. The crowd gasped. This was unprecedented. A wealthy merchant offering partnership to a poor orphan, promising him an inheritance as though he were his own son. Yusuf stood there, overwhelmed, his mind racing. This was more than he had ever dreamed. This was a complete transformation of his destiny. But even as the offer hung in the air, He thought carefully before responding. Haji Farouk, Yusuf said slowly, your generosity overwhelms me, and I accept your offer with deep gratitude. But I have one condition. Name it, Haji Farouk said immediately. Anything. I will join your business. I will learn from you, and I will work to build something lasting and good, Yusuf said. But I will never stop serving those who have nothing. I will never forget where I came from. Every week I will set aside time to help the widows, the orphans, the elderly and the poor. Not because I have to, but because that is who I am. That is what my mother taught me, and that is what this journey has confirmed. That true wealth is not measured in gold, but in the service we give and the trust we keep. Haji Farouk's eyes glistened with tears. He nodded solemnly. Then, we are in agreement, and I will join you in this service. For you have taught me something I had forgotten in my pursuit of wealth, that success without compassion is meaningless, and that a fortune built on the backs of others is built on sand. The two men embraced, and the crowd erupted once more in celebration. That evening, a great feast was prepared in the village square. Tables were laden with food, lanterns were lit as darkness fell, and the entire village, rich and poor, young and old, came together to celebrate not just Yusuf's return, but the lesson his journey had taught them all. As the night deepened and the celebrations continued, Yusuf slipped away quietly to the small graveyard on the edge of the village. He walked between the simple headstones until he found the two he was looking for. His father's, weathered by time, and his mother's, still relatively new. He knelt between them, placing one hand on each stone, and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Ammi, Abba, I wish you could see what has happened. I wish you could know that your teachings were not wasted, that the path you showed me was the right one. You told me that Wafadari or Khidmat se hi Taqdeer badalti hai, and Ammi, you were right. My destiny has changed, not because I was clever or strong or lucky, but because I remained loyal to the values you gave me, because I served without expectation, because I kept faith even when everything seemed lost. He paused, tears streaming down his face, and then continued, I promise you both that I will not squander this blessing. I will use what I have been given to help others rise as I have risen. I will teach what you taught me. And when my time comes to leave this world, I will leave behind not just wealth or property, but a legacy of service, of loyalty, of faith that transforms. As he sat there in the quiet darkness, Yusuf felt a presence, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real. It was as though his mother and father were there beside him, their hands on his shoulders, their voices whispering in his heart, we are proud of you, our son, so very proud. He stayed there for a long time, praying, weeping, and giving thanks. And when he finally rose and walked back toward the celebration, he passed by his old crumbling house, the place where he had spent so many years in poverty and solitude. He stood before it for a moment, looking at its broken walls and leaking roof, and he made a decision. I will repair this house, he said aloud to himself. Not for me. I will live elsewhere now, but for the next person who needs shelter, for the next orphan, the next widow, the next soul who feels forgotten by the world. This house will become a place of refuge, a reminder that no one is truly forgotten, that Allah sees everyone, and that change is always possible. Years later, the story of Yusuf's journey would become legend in Nur Idil and beyond. Parents would tell it to their children at bedtime. Scholars would reference it in their teachings about faith and character. And travelers passing through the region would hear whispers of the poor orphan who carried a fortune across the desert and never once betrayed the trust placed in him. Yusuf himself would go on to become one of the most successful and beloved merchants in the region. But unlike other wealthy men, he never forgot his roots. He built schools for poor children. He established funds to support widows and orphans. He personally visited the sick and elderly every week, often bringing food, and medicine from his own resources, and most remarkably, he trained other young men and women in the art of commerce, giving them opportunities they never would have had otherwise. The house where he once lived in poverty was transformed into a shelter that welcomed anyone in need, and above its door, Yusuf placed a wooden sign with words carved in beautiful calligraphy. Wafadari ar Khidmat sehi Taqdeer Badli hai. Destiny changes only through loyalty and service. And beneath those words, a verse from the Quran, Inna ma'al usri yusra, verily with hardship comes ease. These words became the guiding principle not just for Yusuf's life, but for the entire community. They reminded everyone who saw them that true success is not found in taking shortcuts, in betraying trust, or in pursuing wealth at any cost. True success is found in remaining faithful to one's values, in serving others selflessly, and in trusting that Allah sees all, knows all, and rewards those who remain steadfast. And so the story ends, not with a simple happily ever after, but with a profound truth that echoes through generations, that the greatest treasures in life are not the ones we carry in chests, but the ones we carry in our hearts. That loyalty is a sacred covenant between the soul and the divine, that service to others is service to Allah, and that no matter how dark the journey, no matter how heavy the burden, no matter how lost we feel, if we remain faithful, if we remain true, if we remain loyal to the path of righteousness, our destiny will change. Not by our own power, but by the infinite mercy of the one who created us, who tests us, and who ultimately guides us home. Alhamdulillah. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord of the worlds.